Chapter 3450. So what if it's a defensive talisman array? I don't believe that with so many of you, you can't break a tiny defensive talisman array. Hurry and go! Miao Rengue shouted anxiously. Those cultivators from the Divine Province were originally around level 10 spiritual masters, but after coming to the lower star domain, their realms were suppressed to the peak of level 15 Great Mystic Cultivator Realm. But even so, dealing with these ant-like members of the Chow family in front of them was still a piece of cake in their eyes. However, they didn't expect that once they made a move, the situation would always be very different from what they expected. To be honest, MO12 gave them an unexpected surprise. Next, Little Six Zhang and the others also summoned their mystic beasts and spirit beasts one after another. The entire small courtyard already couldn't accommodate so many people. The four walls were trampled to the ground by the irascible beasts. The marquee of Jeyuan's estate became a battlefield for the battle beasts. Only the sound of the wind could be heard everywhere, accompanied by beast roars and fighting. Miao Rengue stared in displeasure at the members of the Chow family surrounded by the defensive talisman array and shouted angrily, "Capture the others first." Before he could finish speaking, Chow Zhongbong flew out of the defensive talisman array. Another faint light circled around his palm, and 60 blue talismans once again formed a defensive talisman array, rapidly enveloping Little Six Zhang and the others. "Damn it!" Miao Rengue bellowed. "Don't let them shrink back into their turtle shells." "Kill!" More than a dozen of Miao Rengue's subordinates simultaneously rushed up and slapped their palms on the two defensive talisman arrays. Madame Ney ran tightly hugged Chow San in her arms and pulled him back a few steps. Little Six Zhang and the others moved very quickly. After being enveloped by the defensive talisman array, they attacked Miao Rengue's subordinates from time to time. Relying on the protection of the defensive talisman array, Miao Rengue's subordinates were ambushed several times. Among them, a fatty wearing a headscarf was swept in the abdomen by a withered vine released by Ai, and he was almost stabbed by Captain Gao's sword. Fortunately, he was quick-witted and retreated several steps, thus avoiding another withered vine attack that Ai threw at him. Looking down, he saw that the clothes on his abdomen had already been cut open by the sword Qi. But with Captain Gao's strength, it would be difficult for him to hurt this profound realm level 15 expert. The fatty jumped up furiously as if he had been stabbed in the buttocks. Cursing, he took out a giant hammer from his inner world and smashed it at the defense rune array in front of him. Bang! Bang! It was as if he had not expected the defensive array glyphs to be so sturdy and unbreakable. The fatty roared and rubbed his fists, ready to fight against the defensive rune array. Little Six Zhang and the others made use of the defensive array glyphs to launch several attacks at Fatty and the others, but they were slapped back every time. If it weren't for the defensive array glyphs protecting them, they would have been injured long ago. Little Sixth, be careful. Hua Gu pulled Little Six Zhang's arm and kicked that fatty's left leg. This time, when he kicked out through the defense array glyphs, it was like kicking an iron plate. Hua Gu hurriedly bent down and stroked her leg, rubbing it back and forth to reduce the pain. "Hua Gu, how are you?" Captain Gao called out anxiously. "Don't worry, I won't die." "This defensive array glyphs is about to be broken," Little Six Zhang said with a cold expression. "Judging from the current strength of the attacks, in less than 5 minutes." Little Six Zhang spat a mouthful of blood on the fat man's face and said with a sneer, "You regard us as ants, but in the eyes of others in the Divine Province, you people are perhaps inferior to ants." "What did you say?" That fat man was truly infuriated by 6th young Master Zheng. He covered his bleeding abdomen with one hand and hurriedly took out a healing pill from his inner world and swallowed it. He gloomily stared at the 6th young master, who was covered in blood and whose original color could no longer be discerned from his white robe. He sneered and said, "Stinking brat, today I'll use you as an offering to my saber." After saying this, amidst the jeers of his companions, he put Little Sixth on the ground in a few moves. Then, he raised his fan-sized palm and punched Little Six Zheng's head. If this hit landed squarely, Little Six's head would definitely bleed, and he would lose his life. Chapter 34:52. Miao Rengue looked at his subordinates who were watching the show and said gloomily, "Why aren't you guys making a move? Why are you only watching the show? Boss, don't be anxious. In any case, none of these people can escape today. Let's see how the fatty beats that punk until he cries for his parents first. Isn't that punk arrogant? Let's see how he can still be arrogant now. Even if he doesn't kill that punk with this punch, he'll at least turn him into an idiot. Ha ha ha, I wonder what kind of scene it will be if this gigolo turns into an idiot." A burst of taunting laughter spread among them. Miao Rengue's subordinates all looked engrossed in watching little Six Zheng suffer a setback. Some even crossed their arms in front of their chests, assuming a lofty and contemptuous posture. Hua Gu and the others dashed over and yelled, "Stop!" their eyes nearly popping out of their sockets. However, with their skills, it was very difficult for them to rescue their companion from that peak mystic cultivator's hands. In the blink of an eye, that fatty's fist, which was the size of a copper bowl, was about to land on little Six Zheng's head. Suddenly, a green vine, which was as thick as a person's wrist, shot over from afar and fiercely tugged at that fatty's hand. It directly coiled around his fat wrist 3 to 4 times and pulled tightly. The fatty instantly narrowed his eyes from the pain, feeling like his wrist was about to be broken in that instant. The pulling force was so great that he forgot to scream for a moment. Instead, he dazedly turned his head and looked in the direction the green vine extended. Everyone followed his gaze and looked over, only to see a plain-colored figure as white as snow arrive in front of them in the blink of an eye at an extremely fast speed. As fast as a bolt of lightning, it was only a fleeting glimpse. This person, who was pure and unadorned, had a frosty expression on her face as she coldly gazed at them, as if she was looking at a group of corpses. That expression made everyone unable to help but shiver slightly. They looked at her with a somewhat hesitant expression and subconsciously took a few steps back. "Sister? Sister? It's sister!" Chao Sen's exclamation broke the silence. Everyone stared blankly at the little girl with a cold expression standing above the ruins. She just stood there quietly without making a sound. Her eyes were as cold as water as she looked at everyone. For a long time, she didn't say a single word. However, just by standing there like that, the killing intent and evil aura all over their bodies swept towards them like waves that splashed the sky. Miao Rengue couldn't help but tremble slightly. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the little girl. "Who are you?" He purposely used a very gentle tone to spit out these 4 words. It was as if as long as he calmly asked, the fear in his heart would be extinguished. However, what answered him was a green vine that suddenly shot out and viciously whipped him in the face. Pa! The burning vine whip landed on Miao Rengue's old face. He was so shocked that he couldn't help but tremble and jump up. It was just a reflexive action. After he jumped up, he realized that his actions were as hilarious as a clown's. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out to touch the bloodstains on his face. Miao Rengue couldn't help but roar angrily, "Stupid girl, how dare you? Pa! Pa pa! Pa!" Chapter 34:53. One after another, the vine whip landed on his old face, body, neck, and head, again and again. Miao Rengue didn't even have a chance to breathe. Everyone stared at the scene in front of them, dumbfounded. The little girl didn't say a word. She just swung the vine whip in her hand and hit Miao Rengue's face again and again. Seeing this, Miao Rengue's subordinates were all shocked. They couldn't help but quietly retreat in all directions. "You little ants, where do you think you're going?" The peony fairy smiled and flashed to the front of the fat man. She stretched out her finger and poked the back of his head, giggling. The bell-like laughter inexplicably made the fat man tremble. He couldn't help but feel a little scared. Even though the woman before him appeared to be in the prime of her youth, possessed a voluptuous and graceful body that would make one drool, and her face was also extremely beautiful. But he didn't know why, but he just felt that she was dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. "Stupid man, why are you staring at me like that?" The peony fairy smiled and poked the back of the fat man's head again with her finger. This poke made the fat man suddenly feel a sharp pain in the back of his head. Reaching out to touch the back of his head, he immediately felt blood on his hand. His eyes immediately widened. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I used a little too much strength." The peony fairy twisted the fat man's arm with a smile. The fat man suddenly cried out. Cold sweat rolled down his head. His eyes were wide open and his face was distorted by the erosion of pain. He felt that his arm was already broken. The appearance of this arm didn't change, but the bones inside were probably broken. And it was the kind that was broken into pieces. When touched, it was as soft as noodles. He could even hear the sound of bones inside, which was very terrifying. Chow Moo's apricot eyes coldly swept an indifferent glance at that shrieking fatty. The moment she glanced at him coldly, the peony fairy suddenly turned hostile. She slapped the fat man's face and couldn't help scolding him angrily. "You're a big man. Why are you screaming? My little girl doesn't like to hear such a terrible scream." That slap immediately knocked the fat man's chin down. The fat man tilted his face in pain. After his chin fell, saliva dripped down his clothes. Seeing this, the peony fairy gave him a look of disgust. She kicked him back to Dao Wuji's side as if he was a piece of trash. She waved her hand and said, "Go and deal with him. He's so dirty that I don't even want to touch him." When Dao Wuji heard this, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. He immediately grabbed the fat man like he was grabbing a chicken and directly threw him into the pile of ruins behind him. The pile of rubble was originally a wall, but now, half of it had collapsed. The fat man was hanging there like a dead dog, unable to free himself for a long time. The rest of Miao Rengui's men were so frightened that they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at them and nodded with a smile. "Do you want to go over and sit by yourselves, or do you need us to send you over?" He pointed at the pile of rubble where the fat man was standing with a smile on his face. It was like a spring breeze, looking very warm. Miao Rengui's men all shuddered. They quickly shrank their bodies and moved their feet slightly. Chapter 3454. One of the men, who was a few years younger than the rest, took a few steps back, turned around abruptly, and flew out of the courtyard wall. Looking at his posture, he wanted to abandon his companions and escape. Moreover, he also thought that he could definitely escape under the eyes of the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and the others if he was caught off guard. Escape, 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 he had to escape. Ji Chen narrowed his eyes. His powerful divine sense turned into a bolt of lightning and struck the man's back. The invisible pressure was like an insurmountable mountain. It hit the man so hard that he fell to the ground. He rolled twice on the ground, gasping for breath, and coughed violently. The young man felt as if his shoulder had been cut open by a heavy long knife. All the bones in his body seemed to have been completely shattered by this blow. He did not know what was going on. The rest of the people's expressions changed abruptly. They looked at Ji Chen in horror. They had seen it very clearly just now. This person did not move at all. He did not even move a finger. It was definitely just a wisp of divine sense. After releasing it, he beat the man to the ground. What did this mean? It meant that this person's divine sense was far above all of them. It was like an insurmountable mountain. It was too high to reach. How could they endure this? Want to escape? How would you be able to escape when someone else's divine sense enveloped you? Miao Rengui turned to look at the young man who was groaning on the ground and could not get up. The rest of Miao Rengui's subordinates all trembled and walked sensibly toward the ruins where the fat man was. They lowered their heads like roosters that had been defeated in a fight. How could they still be in high spirits and at ease? When they looked at their leader, Miao Rengui, they could not bear to look at him directly. The fat man and the others could not help but tremble secretly when they saw such a miserable state. The leader had been hit by countless vine whips all over his body. He was on the verge of death. He breathed in less than he breathed out. Would Aber let him die so easily? The answer was obviously impossible. She put away the vine whip and stared coldly at Miao Rengui in front of her. She looked at this guy who was lying on the ground like a dead dog, not moving at all, as if he was dead. Chow Mu shot him a chilly glance, and Boundless Blade immediately ran up. He jerked his buttocks and dragged Miao Rengue over like trash, ruthlessly tossing him at her feet. Chow Mu glanced at the man who was paralyzed on the ground and stepped over him, walking toward her parents and family without consulting anyone. "Don't let him die." Her cold voice was like a bit of frost spreading from the depths of winter, so cold that it made people keep quiet out of fear. Qiao Zhongbang and Wei Ziqin recovered from their shock and rubbed their eyes. They could not believe that Jojo was standing right in front of them. "Joe! Chow Chow!" The whole family hurriedly withdrew the defense array glyphs and ran out, surrounding her in an instant. Aber secretly clenched her fists. She thought of the dangerous scene just now. If she had come a step later, something might have really happened. "Jojo, quick, come and take a look at young Master Zheng's injuries." Wei Ziqin was very careful. She did not have time to chat with her daughter. She hurriedly grabbed her daughter's hand and pulled her to little Six Zheng's side. Aber crouched down next to little Six Zheng. She could not help but exude a cold aura when she saw that he was covered in blood. Chapter 34:55. This guy's shoulder bones were fractured, and his arms were also broken in several places. Most importantly, he suffered a brutal beating from that fat man. Not only was his body riddled with scars, but his internal organs also suffered very serious internal injuries. He truly looked too wretched, and Abba couldn't help but feel pain for him. "Does it hurt?" Little Six Zheng shook his head with feigned ease. "Don't worry. If it weren't for the fact that he was injured, Abba really wanted to give him a good knock on the head." How could she not worry? This guy's fighting style just now was simply too reckless. It was completely a desperate stance of harming the enemy at the cost of his own life. Her needles were very swift, and she only needed to insert a few needles to stop the bleeding. She then took out a medicine bottle from her inner world and poured out a pill for him to swallow before saying, "The injuries to your internal organs can't be healed in a short period of time." As she spoke, she had already perfectly connected his broken bones, carefully applied ointment, and fixed them with a splint. This tendon-rupturing bone-mending ointment can't touch water for 2 hours after it's applied. It can be removed after 2 hours. If you can move your arms perfectly fine, that means there aren't any major problems. If it still feels swollen and sore, then you have to tell me immediately. We still have to apply the ointment again. Little Six Zhang was somewhat lost in thought as he gazed at the little stoic girl prattling endlessly in front of him. It seemed like they hadn't seen each other for too long. At first, he thought it was his misconception and kept feeling that the little girl in front of him was unreal. But now, after listening to her endlessly instructing him, she raised her hand to poke his forehead. Only then did sixth young Master Zhang return to his senses and smile at her. "I'm very happy that you can come back, Jojo. I'm also very happy to see you guys again." Little Sixth, Captain Gao, Flower Mushroom. Seeing that Little Sixth's life was no longer in danger, Wei Ziqin completely relaxed. Feeling that her heart was still pounding non-stop like a drum, Wei Ziqin reproached him. "Little Sixth, you really scared your Auntie Wei to death just now. When this child was fighting with that fat man, he truly didn't even care about his life. If Jojo hadn't arrived in time, the consequences would have been too horrible to contemplate." "I'm fine, Auntie Wei." However, Little Six Zhang was very clear that he hadn't gone crazy at all just now. His mind was even clearer than at any other time. He only followed his heart and did his best to protect the Qiao family. He didn't want to leave any regrets in his life. For example, disappointing Jojo. Captain Gao walked over excitedly and said, "Jojo, you came just in time." If Jojo had come a few minutes later, they probably wouldn't have been able to hold on. At this moment, they saw that the group of people who were originally bullying them were as obedient as quails, huddling in a corner and not daring to move or make a sound. Everyone felt an inexplicable sense of pleasure. Abba nodded at the members of the huge bear squad. Her gaze swept past them one by one before finally landing on the demonic cultivator Ai, and her eyes lit up slightly. The members of the giant bear squad had gathered. Her eyes were so bright that everyone noticed that she was a little strange. Logically speaking, it should be the first time the little girl had met E and the others, but that gaze. It felt like they had known each other for a long time. Captain Gao touched his nose, but he didn't say anything. He put his strange thoughts aside. Chapter 3456. He had interacted with the little girl many times and was used to her strange attitude, so he did not find it strange at all. On the other hand, Ai and the others looked at the little girl curiously. Although they felt strange, they did not say anything. Mother. Aba released Xiao Lin with a wave of a hand and let the little girl run to her parents. Wei Ziqin, Qiao Zhongbang, and the others were pleasantly surprised. They did not expect that when their eldest daughter came back, she also brought back their youngest daughter whom they had been worried about these past few days. Lin, are you all right? Are you hurt? The family asked all at once. I'm fine. Qiao Lin waved her little hand, and a few drops of tears flashed in her eyes. She said emotionally, I was taken to the divine continent by them. It was sister who saved me. Sister and brother-in-law rushed back as soon as they knew that everyone was in danger. So that was it. Wei Ziqin and the others were enlightened. They were still wondering how Jojo could come back so timely. It turned out that he met Xiao Lin. Little Mo is back too? Qiao Zhongbang smiled. Really? Mou heard and quickly ran over to ask, Where's my big brother? Aba's gaze fell on the child. Compared to more than a year ago, Xiao Yu had grown much taller, and his little face had lost its former naivety. He looked much more mature than before. She could not help but reach out and pat his head. Your big brother has already rushed to the palace. I'm sorry to have frightened you. Eldest sister-in-law, I'm fine. Mou quickly exclaimed. He was really not injured just now. He was just shocked when he saw Xiao Lu injured. This time, it's all thanks to you, Commander Hui, and young General He Tian who came to rescue us. Wei Ziqin said with emotion. I wonder how the situation in the palace is now. Mother, don't worry. With Lien here, nothing will happen. Aba comforted them and turned his head to look at Miao Rengue, who was forced to kneel on the side. His eyes suddenly became dangerous. When Dao Wuji saw the little girl looking at him, he hurriedly dragged Miao Rengue as if he was dragging a bag of trash and threw him in front of the little girl. He clapped his hands and said with a smile, I thought these people had 3 heads and 6 arms, but when I looked carefully, there was nothing. TSK, they are really bold. They actually dared to come to this little girl's maiden home to cause trouble. Benefactress. Why don't you release this little monk? This little monk hasn't seen your mother for a long time. Let me see them. She couldn't deal with the little monk's repeated, female benefactor is your mother, and female benefactor is your father. Aber only felt that this little fellow was too long-winded and kept on shouting. It was like a demonic sound piercing through his brain. Thus, he helplessly let him out. Benefactress is her mother, benefactress is her father. When this strange appellation came out, everyone's attention was immediately drawn to him. When Wei Ziqin saw the little monk, she almost cried. She hurriedly went up and hugged the little meat bun who was running over. She had a surprised and happy expression. Kong Yu, why are you here? This little monk was also saved by benefactress. Mother, I accidentally picked up Kong. Aber reached out and picked up the little fatty. He said with a helpless expression, We'll talk about this later. Right now, the most important thing for her was to treat their wounds. Chapter 3457. Aba's treatment of injuries was very fast. In less than a moment, she had treated everyone's injuries. After this battle, everyone more or less had some small injuries on their bodies. Qiao Mu distributed different pills, medicinal liquids, ointments, and the like to them. After applying them externally or ingesting them orally, It didn't take long for everyone to feel that their injuries had visibly taken a turn for the better, and their spirits were also much better. Seeing that everyone was fine, Arbor was relieved. She finally thought of Miao Rengui, who had been thrown to the side by Dao Wuji. At this moment, Miao Rengui was like a quail kneeling at the side, not daring to even breathe loudly. This was a world of difference from the overbearing attitude he had before. How overbearing he was before was how funny he was now. Arbor looked at him coldly. This person's body was covered in wounds and he looked battered and exhausted. Qiao Sen struggled free from Madame Nei Ren's embrace and scuttled to Qiao Mu's side. He threw himself into her arms and complained loudly, "Eldest sister, they said they want to capture us alive. They want to capture me and Dad and Mom." When Qiao Lin heard this, she was also infuriated. Just as she was about to step forward and kick Miao Rengui, Qiao Mu swiftly caught her. At the same time, Miao Rengui, who had been lying on the ground like a quail, suddenly stood up and almost grabbed Qiao Lin's wrist. Seeing this, Dao Wuji slapped that person's face. "Yo, you still know how to pretend to be a grandson and lie low. What, you still want to capture a hostage in order to escape?" Qiao Lin raised her hand and patted her chest. Her pair of black eyes immediately widened. "Big sister. It's this person. It's his big brother who captured me. I heard them talking. He called that black-clothed man his big brother." Arbor immediately understood and nodded. Her eyes were cold. She looked at Miao Rengui and asked indifferently, "Are you going to confess honestly, or should I ask someone to search your soul?" Miao Rengui's expression changed drastically when he heard the word, soul search. He couldn't help but shudder. This little girl kept mentioning the word, soul search, and said it so casually. She didn't look like a kind-hearted person at all. He looked into the little girl's eyes and immediately understood that she was not joking. If she did not confess honestly, the little girl would definitely not let her off. Soul search? Perhaps she would use something even more terrifying than soul-searching to deal with him. Arbor looked at him coldly. "Have you thought it through? You only have one chance to choose." I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything." Miao Rengui was almost scared out of his wits. He quickly answered while trembling. "Miss, if you have any questions, please ask. I will definitely tell you everything I know." Arbor ignored the man's flattery and asked directly, "Who captured my sister?" Miao Rengui looked at Qiao Lin with trembling eyes. Seeing this, Qiao Lin was furious. Thinking about how this person wanted to capture her as a hostage, she wanted to go up and kick him a few times. "You're about to die. Why are you still stuttering?" Qiao Lin shouted unhappily. "I asked you something. Why are you looking at me?" Miao Rengui was very flustered at this moment. He personally saw his big brother capture the little girl in front of him and said that he would bring her back to the divine lands. Now, this little girl appeared here unharmed. Chapter 3458. What did this mean? It meant that something might have happened to his big brother, Miao Sheng. Otherwise, how could he have fallen into such a situation? Arbor raised his wrist and whipped him. "What's there to consider? Just speak the truth. If you speak a single word of falsehood," Arbor gazed deeply at him, "there will be no place for you in the deepest hell." Miao Rengui's heart constricted, and he hastily kowtowed in fright. He repeatedly said, "I absolutely don't dare to deceive Mississippi. TT, that's my big brother. The one who captured your sister is my big brother, Miao Sheng. You are not members of the Pangu clan." Arbor's cold gaze swept over him. "Speak, which clan do you belong to?" Miao Rengui shrunk his neck and couldn't help but tremble. His eyeballs rolled uncontrollably as he hastily said, We are indeed members of the Pangu clan." Ah! A vine whip landed on his eye, directly whipping half of his eyeball into the air. Miao Rengui rolled on the ground in pain, wailing incessantly. His other eye glared at Arbor resentfully. Not a single word of truth. Arbor flew into a rage. His eyes glinted sharply as he stared at that person. He then turned to look at He Chen, who was standing leisurely on the side. Peach Blossom. The little stoic was impatient, revealing an expression that said, "I don't want to talk to you anymore." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist rolling his eyes. He took a few steps forward and poked her forehead with a finger. "I've said it many times, my name is not Peach Blossom. This venerable Peach Blossom Immortal is called He Chen." He winked and pursed his lips in dissatisfaction. Without waiting for Miao Rengui, who was lying on the ground, to stand up, He Chen's bony palm abruptly pressed down on Miao Rengui's skull. Miao Rengui immediately let out a blood-curdling scream, as if he was experiencing the darkest and most terrifying thing in his life. His entire body trembled uncontrollably, and his lips couldn't help but twitch. Jolin was shocked. She pulled her brother and took a step back at the same time. The siblings were confused. Looking at Miao Rengui, who seemed to be experiencing something terrible, they couldn't help but look at each other. "Second sister, what is he doing?" Qiao Sen asked in confusion. "That uncle looks like he's in a lot of pain." Jolin nodded and could not help but whisper, "Just now, Big Sister said that she wanted to search his soul." "I'm afraid this is it." "What's the use of soul searching?" "Amitba, Benefactress's younger sister, Benefactress's younger brother, you two are too young now." It was normal that he didn't understand. It was better to stay away from such dangerous and frightening matters, so as not to spoil your naive natures. "Excellent, excellent." Jolin and Jolin looked at each other in confusion. What was going on? The two of them, brother and sister, were told by a 5-year-old monk, "Are you two still too young?" "Big sister, I really want to slap him," Qiao Sen mumbled. The corner of Jolin's mouth twitched. She raised her hand to rub her brother's little head and nodded heavily. She also wanted to pull this chubby little monk over, and viciously take 2 bites. Ha ha ha. After searching Miao Rengui's soul, He Chen directly threw him to the ground. Miao Rengui was not completely dead. At this moment, he was still struggling at death's door, and his eyes were rolled back. His eyes were filled with the color of death, and his throat was letting out waves of roars before he died. Right now, he only had a trace of consciousness left. His entire person was basically useless. Chapter 3459. He slumped to the ground, his only eye glowing with resentment. He tried his best to turn his head to look at Arbor. "He's from the Shi family." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal walked to Arbor's side. He took out a clean handkerchief and wiped his fingers with a disgusted expression. Then, he threw the handkerchief to the ground and shattered it into pieces with a blast of saint power. Mysophobia was a disease. Arbor glanced at him and asked, "The Shi family?" "That Shi family." "This guy's big brother, Miao Shang, is the second daughter of the Shi family's first branch, Shi Yongqian's close confidant." "So this incident was caused by Shi Yongqian?" Anger roiled in Xiao Mu's heart, and her eyes, which were as clear as a cold moon, seethed with a thunderous fury. What a Shi Yongqian! What a Shi family's second daughter! She hadn't had time to settle the score with her for what happened in her previous life. Now, she had the guts to attack her family again. It was simply too wonderful for words. Arbor's eyes were filled with murderous intent. "Shi Yongqian, you've lived long enough." Miao Rengui's 8th-level spiritual beast. Little Tai Sui walked over with a shrunken blaze hound in his hand. Before he could say anything, he suddenly heard a series of barks. The 3 puppies that had been peacefully staying on Paradise Planet suddenly jumped out. One of them jumped onto little Tai Sui without a word and slapped the blaze hound to the ground with one paw. The other 2 puppies dashed forward and patted the head of the trembling flame hound from the left and right. The 2 puppies carefully rubbed the blaze hound's head with their paws, as if they were caressing something. However, the following actions and images were not as beautiful. One of the puppies used its sharp nails to cut open the blaze hound's head. Furry took out a spirit beast's crystal core and looked like it was in a difficult position. It looked like it was wronged as it swallowed the power inside the crystal core. Everyone was dumbfounded. They couldn't help but turn to glance at Arbor. Arbor didn't have the mind to pay attention to the three puppies. She was completely focused on the Shi family's attack on her. She had to get back at them for this. Since Shi Yongqian dared to send people to the lower star zone to make trouble for her, she should know the consequences of courting death. Arbor took a deep breath. She recalled how she had suffered at the hands of this woman in her previous life, and the coldness in her eyes deepened. Because of the Blazehound's death, Miao Rengui, who was already in a daze, suffered another heavy blow to his mind. He instantly collapsed to the ground while fresh blood gurgled out from his mouth, and his eyes were already extremely unfocused. His Highness the Crown Prince is here. Hui Feng's joyful voice sounded from outside the door. Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince. All the soldiers knelt down and saluted. Mo Lien strode over with a group of purple forest guards, followed by the Marquis of Stability, Zhao Shang, and the others. Rise. Mo Lien waved her hand and had them rise. She quickly walked into the ruined Qiao estate courtyard. She couldn't help but frown. Judging from the extent of the destruction, it must have been a major battle. Fortunately, she and Jojo had arrived in time. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unthinkable. Mo Lien quickened her steps. She arrived at Arbor's side in the blink of an eye. Jojo, are you all right? Greetings, Your Highness. Everyone hurriedly bowed respectfully. Chapter 3460. Mo Lien's gaze swept over them one by one, and she hastily said, Everyone is Jojo's relatives and friends, so there's no need to be overly courteous. Dad, Mom, we've startled you. Qiao Zhongbang and Wei Ziqin smiled with gratification. Little Mo, you and Jojo came back just in time. It was a scare but not a mishap, a scare but not a mishap. How's the palace? Arbor asked in a low voice. Grandmother is injured, and it's quite serious. Grandmother's injury is very serious. Mou was startled when she heard this, and she hastily ran to their side. Eldest brother, where is grandmother injured? She injured her right hand. I'm afraid you'll have to take a look at her injury. Mo Lien frowned and turned to grab Arbor's small hand as she spoke. Wei Ziqin was instantly anxious. Jojo, quickly enter the palace and examine Her Majesty the Queen Dowager. Okay. Arbor nodded. Mom, don't be anxious. I'll definitely treat grandmother. Wei Ziqin recalled that little Six Zhang had also injured his shoulder and arm just now, and it was extremely serious, but her daughter had also roughly treated it in a few strokes. Presumably, Her Majesty the Queen Dowager should be fine as well. Then let's not delay any longer. There's nothing else to do here. Jojo, quickly enter the palace with little Mo. Okay. Arbor nodded and looked back at Miao Rengui, who was staring at the sky with his eyes wide open. He had already died from the backlash of the spirit beast's death. He snorted coldly. This person really got off too easy. Those people are useless now. Arbor swept a glance at the row of people gathered next to the ruined wall and said aloofly, including this Miao Rengui, crush them into ashes and find me an exquisite little jar to store them in. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist twitching his mouth, and he nodded with a grin. Oh my God, even when their little miss did such a cruel thing, she still appeared so amusing. The little stoic's eyes were aloof, but her words were gentle and soft, as if she wasn't going to crush their bones and scatter their ashes. I want to give Miss Sher a gift. She turned around and glanced at He Shurchen. We have to wrap it up nicely. Otherwise, the host will only say that our etiquette is not good enough. Yuan Shurchen couldn't help but cough lightly and nod. Got it. If the little girl wanted to give Miss Sher a gift, then the gift couldn't be too light. 1 jar wasn't enough, so 3 jars would be just right. Little Tai Sui glanced at Ji Chen speechlessly. Do you know what you're called? In the eyes of others, what you're doing is called being an accomplice to a villain. How could that be? My Jojo is so cute. How is he helping the evildoer? He was obviously helping the little guy catch the evil and eradicate the traitor. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't help but roll his eyes at him. He pulled little Tai Sui over and pushed it toward the pile of rubble. Remember to be careful. He had to be fast, ruthless, and accurate. Don't dawdle. I'll go inside and find a few exquisite jars and jars. Do your best. Little Tai Sui. What happened? Why did he become the culprit? When Fairy Ginkgo saw this, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. Oh my God, little brother Tai Sui. Do you want big sister to help you? I'll thank your whole family first. Little Tai Sui irritably rolled its eyes at Fairy Ginkgo before walking toward Miao Rengui's subordinates who were already scared silly. Miao Rengui's dozen or so subordinates were all scared to death. From the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and the others subduing them with thunderous methods, to soul-searching Miao Rengui and killing his 8th level spirit beast. Chapter 3461. After this series of events, they had long since been scared out of their wits. How could they possibly think of resisting? When they saw little Tai Sui walk over, one of them hurriedly fell to the ground and cried tearfully, "Venerable Immortal, please spare my life." Before the suppression of cultivation realms, Luo Rangui was the one with the highest cultivation base among them. Now that Luo Rangui had been dealt with so easily, how could the remaining people not be afraid? Now, they were filled with regret. If they had known this would happen, they would never have followed Luo Rangui to the lower star region to show off their might. Now, they were in big trouble. They had to pay with their lives just to show off their might. This was obviously not a good deal. However, the situation had already been decided. No matter how much they kowtowed and begged for mercy, even if they kowtowed to death, no one would pay them any attention. Little Tai Sui glanced at them indifferently, then slapped the top of their heads with a backhand. At the same time, Arbor and Mo Lien rushed back to the palace at top speed. They hurriedly headed for the Empress Dowager's Longevity Palace. Along the way, Arbor couldn't help but frown when he saw the devastated state of the palace. Someone came to the palace to cause trouble? Yes. When I arrived, someone surnamed Wu brought 3 people and captured a large number of concubines to threaten father. When Mo Lien thought of her old father's frightened appearance, the anger in her heart couldn't help but overflow. Even though this adoptive father of his was muddle-headed and bad, the love he had for him did not contain any benefits, and there was no discount at all. Moreover, although this old man sometimes lost his wits due to lust, he still listened to his ministers. All these years, the entire Mo kingdom could be considered to have had good weather, and the people were in good health. If another obstinate and self-opinionated person were to lead the Mo kingdom, they might not be able to do as well as his father. He didn't think that these people would be so bold as to come to the lower star region and touch his family. Xiao Mu's expression also darkened, and her eyes emitted a chilly glint. This group of people came for me. They were sent by Shi Yongqian. Of course, she also had a lot of questions in her heart. Why would Shi Yongqian go through so much trouble to come to the lower space zone and attack her family? Also, it was quite a scheme of them to blame the Pangu clan for everything. Jing Ti, the patriarch of the Pangu clan, must have been investigating her since she killed his daughter, Jing Minyao. What about Shi Yongqian? She had many conflicts with Xiao Mu, but it had never resulted in anyone's life. So how did Xiao Mu also coincidentally set her sights on her Xiao Mu family? Could it really be a coincidence? When the two of them passed through the drooping flower gate, Abba paused slightly and stared deeply at the side of the garden. For men were tied to the edge of the pool, whips were whipping their bodies. Abba looked away. Them. Mo Lien nodded. Then, she called someone over and whispered a few words to them before letting them leave. It was a good court, but now it's a bloody mess. Get someone to drag them out of the palace and beat them. The order he gave was to whip them for 7 days and nights, then execute them by cutting them. Sir Jojo blinked. She suddenly felt that she had been too soft-hearted. Those people who had caused trouble in her home should have been handed over to her husband to be punished. They should have been reduced to ashes by now. It was hard to appease her anger. Chapter 3462. Elder Wu and the other three had long had their cultivations crippled by Prince Mo's order. Now, they were no different from cripples. Even if they were dragged out of the royal palace to be whipped, they were simply powerless to resist. Soon, a large crowd of commoners gathered around the bustling royal palace's entrance to watch the show. Seeing those bastards who forcibly enter the Mo Kingdom capital to commit violence being punished by His Highness the Crown Prince, there wasn't a single person who didn't clap and cheer. Upon hearing that the Crown Prince had returned from the Divine Province with the Crown Princess, they were all unable to contain their joy and automatically knelt in the direction of the royal palace, calling out, "His Highness the Crown Prince." During this period of time, they had had enough of these bandits' attitude. Seeing them receive such punishment, they naturally vented their pent-up frustrations. When Arbor and Mo Lien hurried to the Empress Dowager's Longevity Palace, Gong Chang and had already been waiting for a long time. At this moment, he hastily ran over and led the two people into the Empress Dowager's bedchamber. The elderly woman was currently leaning against the gold-threaded cedar bed. When her gaze landed on the pair of children who had just entered, her eyes clearly brightened. "Grandmother." When Arbor saw that the elderly woman's complexion was pale and unwell, her heart involuntarily tightened. "Quick, quick, come over and let grandmother take a look at you." On the contrary, the elderly woman was very cheerful and didn't appear to be injured at all. Instead, she laughed heartily. If it weren't for Empress Zhao hastily holding her down, the elderly woman might have lifted the blankets and gotten off the bed to welcome them. "Greetings to Royal Father, Royal Mother." Arbor curtsied. The old great king hastily said, "Don't be so courteous. Your grandmother's arm has suffered a very serious injury. Crown Princess, quickly come over and carefully examine her." Arbor nodded and quickly walked up to sit by the bed. Empress Zhao stood up and stood to the side, gazing at the elderly woman with deep worry. Arbor carefully examined the Empress Dowager's arm bone, her brows slightly creased. The Empress Dowager's hand injury was actually more serious than Little Sixth's. Moreover, she was already old, so it was better not to use some overly strong medicines. The great king and Empress Zhao saw that she was silent after the examination, so they asked worriedly, Is it untreatable?" "Yes." Arbor nodded. Then, he took out his needle bag and helped the old lady lie down. "But grandmother has to listen to me. She has to follow my instructions in her daily life. She has to abstain from certain foods and can't be too greedy." She had just taken her pulse and found that the old lady's arm was not the only injury. Her body also needed to be nursed back to health. When the old lady heard this, she immediately muttered unhappily, "I didn't eat too much. I only take 1 or 2 bites every time." Empress Zhao couldn't help but hold her forehead as she exchanged glances with the old great king. The Empress Dowager's personal old mama, Feng Gu, smiled and said, "Crown Princess, you really have to talk to the Empress Dowager this time." "Don't tell on me," Empress Dowager Meng muttered. Suddenly, she felt a slight tingling in her arm. She looked down and saw that the little fellow had already taken out the silver needles from her arm. Apart from the slight tingling just now, he didn't feel anything wrong with it. Empress Dowager Meng said with a smile, "Jojo, your healing skills are getting better and better." "I didn't feel anything when you healed me." Arbor pursed his lips. He took out a pill and stuffed it directly into the Empress Dowager's mouth. "Grandmother, don't be greedy for sweets anymore. I gave you a prescription. You can drink it once a day for half a month. I guarantee that you will be full of energy in the future." Chapter 3463. You won't feel thirsty anymore. "How did you know?" Empress Dowager Meng was halfway through her sentence when she seemed to have thought of something. She quickly shut her mouth and smiled awkwardly at Empress Zhao. Empress Zhao was angry and amused at the same time. This old lady was like an old urchin. She always lied and hid things from them. She was sick and didn't like to take medicine. "What can happen to me?" I'm not bragging, but I have the strength to go up the mountain and fight a tiger. Prince Mo rolled his eyes in annoyance. He stepped forward and gently pressed the restless old lady onto the bed. Grandmother, just listen to Jojo. Rest well for a while. Follow Jojo's prescription and nurse your body back to health. The old lady showed a bitter expression as if she was heroically sacrificing herself. She reluctantly nodded her head. Making her drink that bitter medicinal soup every day was really going to kill her. After Xiao Mu finished bandaging her arm, she gently tucked her in before earnestly saying, "Grandmother, be good and recuperate. Later, I'll make 2 bottles of jelly beans for you to eat one every day. I guarantee you'll like it." Mo Lien was speechless. Jojo looked like he was coaxing a child. It was really annoying. The old lady's eyes lit up when she heard that there were candies that tasted good. "Don't worry, I'm a person with self-control. If you ask me to follow the prescription, I'll definitely follow the doctor's instructions." Feng Gu pursed her lips. She didn't expose her Empress Dowager. Arbor nodded. "That's good. Grandmother, rest well." "Hey, Jojo, you just came back and you're leaving again? We'll stay here for the next 2 days. Don't worry, we'll talk again when you're better." The Empress Dowager was relieved. She nodded and said, Okay. Queen Zhao was a bit baffled. She glanced at the Empress Dowager before looking at Lady Qiao Qiao. She thought to herself, the young crown prince consort said that she wanted to chat with her mother-in-law. I really don't know how she's going to continue chatting awkwardly with someone who stops talking after 3 sentences. Arbor looked at Empress Zhao. Then he stood up expressionlessly. "Father, Mother, let's go out first." The old great king saw that the Empress Dowager was fine. He nodded and hurriedly followed his son out of the Empress Dowager's bedroom. "Son, what's going on?" "It's a long story. Let's go to the study." The old king nodded upon hearing this and turned to the study with Mo Lien. Along the way he asked worriedly, "Will these people come again in the future?" "Don't come again." Just one visit had almost cost him his life. What if those people from the Divine Prefecture could come to their small galaxy as they pleased? Wouldn't that be? They would be unlucky once every 2 to 3 days. Mo Lien looked at the mess in the garden. Her face darkened. She shook her head and said, "It won't happen again." "Father, don't worry." The old great king always knew that his son was very reliable. As long as it was something he said, the old king would believe it 1,000 times over. The father and son went to the study to discuss the matter. Arbor accompanied Empress Zhao to the garden and sat down. "Mother, let me see the bruise on your hand." Empress Zhao was stunned. She smiled and held out her hand. "Mother is fine." Arbor lifted her sleeve. As he applied medicine for her, he said in a low voice, "This happened because of me. I've implicated you." Chapter 3464. When Empress Zhao heard this, she involuntarily knitted her brows and said, "What silly things are you saying? Since we are a family, we naturally share blessings and misfortunes. What's there to implicate?" Arbor looked up at her and nodded. "Don't worry, this kind of thing will never happen again." Empress Zhao smiled at her and nodded. "Mother personally believes in you too." The 2 of them chatted for a while more. Seeing that the queen wasn't in good spirits, Arbor had someone send her back to the palace to rest. That night, Arbor drew several thousand different jade talismans on Fish Orchid Planet. Currently, most of the talismans she drew were purple talismans, so their effects naturally couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as the yellow and blue talismans from before. When the sky was about to brighten, Arbor followed Mo Lien to the gate tower on the outskirts of the Mo Kingdom capital. Looking up at the chilly starry sky, Arbor turned to meet Mo Lien's eyes. "You can start now, Jojo." Mo Lien nodded at her. Arbor then waved her hand, and several thousand jade talismans floated up around her. As if a whirlwind was blowing, they started spinning rapidly. Arbor looked at the wondrous scene in front of her without a change in expression. She extended her small hands and slowly fiddled with the jade talisman arrays. 10 sets of triple defense, confinement, and annihilation talisman arrays swiftly took shape in her hands. Even though Mo Lien was experienced and knowledgeable, she couldn't help but sigh softly. His Jojo could actually create so many purple talismans in a single night on Fish Orchid Planet where the flow of time was 12 times faster. It was simply breathtaking to construct such a powerful attack, defense, and annihilation array. Dao Wuji, who was also watching the show from the gate tower until his eyeballs almost fell out, also couldn't help clicking his tongue in wonder. The little stoic is amazing as expected. It's not like no one in this world knows how to draw defense and confinement talisman arrays, but every talisman array she draws is basically a purple talisman. Its talisman power is definitely much higher than that of ordinary defense and confinement talisman arrays. Moreover, I don't know where this little girl got her experience in drawing talismans. I've never seen such a talisman array that superimposed defensive, confining, and killing effects together. It was rare for Ji Chen to finish listening to Dao Wuji's rambling, and a trace of pride appeared on her face. That's right, this is my family's Jojo. That talisman crafting cultivation is absolutely beyond your imagination. Humph. Dao Wuji couldn't help but snort. What do you mean by yours? Spouting nonsense all the time. When the sky was about to brighten, some of the citizens of the Mo Kingdom capital who were still in a daze were awakened by the loud noises on the streets. Everyone put on their clothes, washed their faces, and went out of the door or looked out of the window. Everyone was shocked by what they saw. An astrolabe the size of a millstone appeared in the sky above the Mo Kingdom capital, enveloping the 4 cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west. Currently, the sky was covered by this astrolabe. Jade talismans emitting lustrous purple light could be seen circulating and swaying on the astrolabe, bobbing up and down. Everyone ran out of their rooms in a clamor and looked up at the sky, conversing with each other in bewilderment. "What is this, mother?" the children asked, blinking their eyes in bewilderment. "I don't know whose handiwork it is to actually assemble countless talisman arrays into this. An elderly man who knew a little about talisman arts looked up at the sky in excitement. He muttered to himself for a while, but he actually couldn't find the right words to describe this large-scale talisman array in front of him. Chapter 3465. This kind of large-scale talisman formation was truly unheard of and unseen. The turbulent flow of talisman energy within was simply breathtaking. It seemed to be formed by absorbing the essence of the sun and moon, endlessly growing and multiplying. The talisman energy seemed to be immortal. Arbor was truly straining to operate this great astrolabe formation with her own strength. That's right. She had used heaven and earth as a medium and the 8 directions as a medium to control the dozens of triple-layered talisman formations to form a great astrolabe formation. This great astrolabe formation was the highest level of talisman formations. Of course, with her current cultivation as an earth-level talisman master, it was still very strenuous for her to barely operate this great astrolabe formation. If she had the support of the profound talisman energy of a heaven-level talisman master, it would be much easier to create this great astrolabe formation. However, she couldn't be bothered to think about such trivial matters at the moment. She was only trying her best to perfect this great astrolabe formation as much as possible. When this great astrolabe formation appeared, the entire court was shocked, both inside and outside. After receiving the news, the great king of the Mo Kingdom, along with the queen and a group of courtiers, all rushed to the city gate tower to take a look. At this moment, the great astrolabe formation's operation was nearing its end. Everyone could only see that above their heads, countless flying talismans were rapidly flowing, forming streaks of light. Suddenly, an enormous purple dragon flew out of the talisman formation and roared towards the east, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Everyone cried out in alarm. The Marquis of Stability, Zhao Shang, exclaimed in pleasant surprise, "Ah, a formation spirit can be formed within the talisman formation, and a dragon-shaped one at that. The power of this formation must be extraordinary. Extraordinary. The Crown Princess is so powerful. The Crown Princess, The Crown Princess. Loud shouts sounded from all directions, and everyone couldn't help but reveal a trace of joy on their faces. His Highness the Crown Prince's wife was truly extraordinary. Xiao Mu slightly clenched her hand into a fist, and with a slight retraction and release, the countless purple talismans originally hovering in the sky all gathered together. They whirled around with a whoosh before abruptly dissipating in the air. The only thing left in Aber's hand was a white jade talisman that emitted a faint purple light. The crowd of commoners was simply stunned by the scene before them. They had never seen such a large talisman construct array. They cheered loudly and even applauded one after another. When Xiao Mu came back to her senses, she saw a group of people cheering with glowing faces like idiots. The little stoic expressionlessly glanced at them. The courtiers who were cheering enthusiastically suddenly felt that the little crown princess was looking at them as if she was looking at a bunch of idiots. The Marquis of Stability, Zhao Shang, coughed and stabilized his old face. He chuckled and said, "Congratulations to the Crown Princess and congratulations to the Crown Princess for successfully setting up the array. The Crown Princess talisman crafting skills are becoming more and more exquisite. Her array formation skills are also far superior to ordinary people. Flattery won't get through." Zhao Shang very energetically flattered the little stoic loudly. Prince Amo speechlessly glanced at him. His lips turned up slightly, and he led the little crown princess toward the old great king who couldn't contain his joy. At this time, Amo Lei was truly grinning from ear to ear. The more he looked at his daughter-in-law, the more pleasing she seemed to be to his eyes. Fortunately, his son had the foresight to strike first and gain the upper hand against such a great talisman practitioner, so he had long since decided to take her as his wife. As expected, his son was much better than him. Just his taste in picking a wife couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as his father's. Aber glanced at the great king, who was grinning like the skin of an orange, with a stoic expression. Chapter 3466. The little stoic said expressionlessly, "Great king, this is the key to opening the great astrolabe formation. You can open and close it at will by dripping a drop of blood. The talisman energy in this great astrolabe formation is probably only enough to last for 10 years. If it isn't opened every day, it can last for about 20 years. When the time comes, I will naturally come back to replenish talisman energy." When the old great king heard this, he grinned from ear to ear. "It's great that she's coming back to replenish talisman energy. That's great, it couldn't be any better. In that case, his daughter-in-law might have to come back every 3 to 5 years. With how worried his son was about his daughter-in-law, he would definitely come back together with her. Wouldn't he be able to see his son at all times?" The old great king grinned so widely that his eyes couldn't be seen. Empress Zhao couldn't resist reaching out to secretly pinch his elbow. Cough. The old great king immediately adjusted his expression and said solemnly, "This humble one thinks that it's better to keep this great astrolabe formation open at all times, so as to avoid being unable to withstand another attack from extraterrestrials." Aber also nodded when she heard this. She naturally didn't know what the great king was scheming. She only felt that the great king might have been frightened by this incident. It was fine to keep it open at all times. At worst, she could just come back every 3 to 5 years to replenish talisman energy. There were naturally benefits to keeping the great astrolabe formation open at all times. Once this great astrolabe formation is activated, the Mo Kingdom capital will be filled with spiritual energy that is 100 times more than the outside world. In addition to gathering defensive, confinement, and annihilation formations, this great astrolabe formation also has mystic guiding and spirit guiding talisman formations. Aber's voice wasn't loud, but at this time, whether it was the great king and the others on the city gate tower or the large crowd gathered below the city gate tower, everyone heard her clearly. Thus, many people couldn't resist whispering to each other and asking questions. Especially those cultivators. The instant the great astrolabe formation was activated, they had already sensed an extraordinary mystic energy aura. Now that they heard the little crown princess tell them about the effects, they couldn't help but be overjoyed. Of course, there were practically no spiritual masters in the Mo Kingdom capital, so very few people could sense the spiritual energy aura here that was 100 times higher than the outside world. The transfer rune formation in the astrolabe formation can only transfer 10,000 people at most. When Xiao Mu said this, she was also a bit excited on the inside. She had never thought that the teleportation array attached to the astrolabe grand formation would be able to teleport 10,000 people. This teleportation glyph array was reserved for them to use at the most critical moment to escape. Of course, he probably wouldn't need to use it. After all, the confinement and extermination rune arrays attached to the great astrolabe formation could kill all of them, not to mention 4 people like Elder Wu. Even if 400 or even 4,000 people like Elder Wu came here in the future, they would all be killed. The purpose of her setting up this teleportation glyph array was to leave a way out for the Great King and the others. Don't you feel that the sky seems to have darkened? As he spoke, the Marquis of Jiajing Su Pingyong, who was always good at smoothing things over, looked up at the gloomy sky in astonishment. Just now, it looked like the sun had just risen from the east. How could it be? In the blink of an eye, it looked like dark clouds had gathered. Everyone rubbed their eyes and discovered that they weren't seeing things. What's going on? It's really darkened. Upon hearing this, Auber looked up at the sky, then glanced at her husband. Emolien couldn't help twitching his mouth. He kept feeling that this matter was developing in a strange direction. Chapter 3467. Emolien coughed lightly and said softly, "This great astrolabe formation is too heaven-defying. I'm afraid." Heavenly law was coming. Sir Jojo expressionlessly looked at the pitch-black sky and handed the jade talisman key to the Great King. Everyone looked at the sky and felt their hair stand on end. Emolien said helplessly, "Purple Forest Guards, escort the citizens into their houses." He turned to look at the Emo Kingdom's old king and his people, who were all dumbfounded. "Royal Father, Royal Mother, this place should be a little unsafe. Why don't you go and hide under the city gate tower first?" Empress Zhao instantly tensed up. She walked up to grab her son's hand and asked, "What happened?" The sky was so dark and gloomy that it looked like a storm was about to come. "Is there going to be hailstorms?" Emolien was a bit amused. She reached out to support her mother and shook her head. "Don't be nervous, Mother. This is normal." Previously, when Jojo produced a supreme-grade divine rank pill, Heavenly Law also had a stroke like this. Today's great astrolabe formation was definitely a heaven-defying formation. How could such a top-notch talisman formation appear in a tiny lower star domain? Auber was still expressionless. He looked up for a moment before saying to Prince Emo, "Don't bother. Have them all come back." At the foot of the city gate tower, a group of fearful commoners were being evacuated by the Purple Forest Guards. When they heard the young Crown Prince Consort's words, they all stopped in their tracks and looked up at this stoic-faced Crown Prince Consort. The little stoic glanced at them expressionlessly. "They're dispersing." What was dispersing? The commoners were naturally at a loss. They didn't know why His Highness the Crown Prince suddenly ordered them to leave. Now, they were even more confused as to why the Crown Princess told them not to evacuate. Emolien looked up at the sky again, and her mouth couldn't help but twitch again. Jojo really was right. The dark clouds and rolling thunder that came menacingly just now seemed to have rolled back. Above the sky, the clouds parted and the sun could be seen. Where was the oppressive dark clouds from before? Everyone looked at each other in confusion. They all felt that today's weather was a little strange. Dao Wuji couldn't help but laugh wildly. He slapped his thigh and shouted, "I knew it. There's a 99% chance that the heavenly Dao is a relative of this little girl." Last time, when the little girl produced a supreme-grade black-patterned divine pill, the heavenly Dao made such a big fuss and wanted to strike the little girl. In the end, it was just for show and slipped away after a few strikes. This time, it was even more laughable. Originally, he wanted to come aggressively and kill the person who created this heaven-defying talisman formation. In the end, when he saw that it was a little girl from afar, He immediately slipped away without even looking at his face. The little stoic, looking at the funny faces of Yi-chan and the others, the little fellow blinked and said very seriously, "I really don't know the heavenly Tao." Puff. The peony fairy couldn't help bursting into laughter. The great king looked at the sky in confusion, then looked at his son and daughter-in-law. "Jojo, is everything all right now? Will there still be trouble in the future?" Arbor shook his head. "Since it didn't strike this time, it naturally won't come in the future. Unless it was sick." Arbor pursed his small lips. "Drip a drop of blood to open the astrolabe formation. You can also choose whether or not to have the formation spirit guard it every day." Yes, of course it has to guard it every day," the great king hastily said. This way, he could naturally consume more talisman energy. Chapter 3468. The old great king's plan was brilliant. This way, he could make his son and wife come back a few more times. Emolienne saw through her old father's thoughts and glanced at him with a spurious smile, but she didn't say anything. He reached out to hold Jojo's small hand and said softly, "You've also been busy the whole night. Let's go back to the palace and rest for a while." Arbor nodded. After the two left, the excited commoners on the streets still couldn't resist discussing this matter in high spirits. Of course, with the protection of this great astrolabe array, the Mo Kingdom capital was already surrounded by a copper wall. Countless cultivators who heard the news would rush to this mystic domain in the future. After all, the mystic energy here was much denser than some of the naturally formed mystic domains in the outside world. Cultivating here would definitely yield twice the results with half the effort, to the extent that the Mo Kingdom capital was almost overcrowded in the future. The old great king could only issue a decree to raise the entry requirements. Only those who met the requirements could enter the city after registering their cultivation. These were all for later. After resting for the whole afternoon, Arbor returned to the Chow family in the evening. At this time, the Chow family's courtyard was already undergoing orderly restoration work. Holding her husband's hand, Arbor entered the main hall with the family and sat down to talk for a while. The way they spoke was basically Wei Ziqin, Madame Nei Ran, and Xiao Yao chattering away, while the little crown princess listened from the side. Occasionally, she would interject, but after a few sentences, she would look up at her husband and ask him to add on. Emolienne was secretly amused and couldn't resist saying, "Father, mother, second uncle, second aunt, Jojo means to bring everyone to the divine land this time. We'll let you all settle down in the divine land in the future. In Dragon Flame City. Jojo is now a rich woman and has purchased many properties. When the time comes, you can live wherever you want." When Chao San heard that they were going to the divine land to play, he was the first to jump up and raise both hands and feet in agreement. Okay. Father, mother, second uncle, let's go to Shenzhou with sister. You only know how to play every day. Wei Ziqin poked Chao Sen's little head with her finger. Then he looked at Arbor hesitantly and said, "Jojo, if we follow you to China, will we be a burden to you in the future?" This was the last thing Wei Ziqin wanted to see. Today, because they were too weak, they almost became a burden to Jojo and his son-in-law. Jojo hopped off his stool and walked over to Wei Ziqin. He held her arm and said seriously, "Mother, you will never be a burden to Jojo. If there is a day when Lotus and I are able to conquer the 3 continents, what meaning is there in conquering the 3 continents if you are not by our side?" Wei Ziqin was touched and poked the little fellow's head with a funny finger. "You love to talk big and make your mother happy. Mother, Jojo is speaking the truth." Emolienne nodded and said, "You should come with us to the divine land. One day, when the 2 of us conquer the 3 continents, we can celebrate together." Everyone. The crown prince was so confident. It was as if conquering the 3 continents was right in front of them. Prince Emo looked at everyone with a smile. The spirit energy in the divine land is rich. This way, we can settle down earlier and slowly expand our meridians. If we cultivate well, our cultivation will definitely improve a lot. We don't have to worry about our cultivation stagnating. Chapter 3469. Qiao Zhongbang and the others were somewhat tempted when they heard this, but their gazes all turned to their daughter, niece. Jojo, will it really not affect you? What they were most worried about was that they would become a burden to the little stoic. If that really happened, then it was fine if they didn't go to the China. So what if they had to stay in this small galaxy for the rest of their lives? Qiao Qiao was an existence that people could only look up to. From the very beginning, she was destined to soar into the sky. As her family, they must not block her path to growth and soar. Seeing their hesitant gazes, Auber involuntarily pulled her father's hand and then her mother's. She looked at second uncle and second aunt and said, "I want our family to be together and never be separated again." Everyone's gazes shifted, and yearning expressions appeared on their faces. Wei Ziqin looked at her daughter's serious expression and suddenly burst into laughter. She nodded and said, "Okay. Mother has entered a demonic barrier. Daughter is right. A family is together, so it's good no matter where we go. We'll bear hardships together and enjoy blessings together. We can even eat chaff, eat radishes, and pickles together." Right. Madame Nei Ran also nodded repeatedly with a smile. She then joked, "We've never traveled far in our lives, so we'll just treat this as a vacation." Our dear Qiao Sen was the happiest. He really treated this as a vacation that he was about to leave immediately. He was so happy that he couldn't control himself and kept rolling around in Auber's arms. "Okay, sister. Are there any fun places in the China? When I go, will sister take me out to play?" Qiao Lin couldn't resist pouring cold water on him. "You have to study. You don't have time to stroll around at all." Qiao Sen, the little monk, couldn't resist chuckling. "Benefactress's brother, when you come to the China in the future, we can also be companions. This little monk has to do morning prayers every day, so I'll wake you up to study then." Qiao Sen, "Thank you so much. How can you be so considerate?" Everyone couldn't resist bursting into laughter and looked at Qiao Sen sympathetically. This little brat originally wanted to travel to Shenzhou, but unexpectedly, he was caught by the little monk and became a study companion. Jolin couldn't help but hold his stomach. "Oh my God, Kong Kong, you're usually so eloquent and logical, but you don't forget to study when you're chanting scriptures?" Hearing this, the little monk nodded and said seriously, "This little monk thinks that studying and traveling thousands of miles are equally important. Even if a person travels thousands of miles, if he is illiterate, in the end, he is still uncultured." Auber. Everyone was speechless. Qiao Sen's face flushed red, and he couldn't help but snort. Was this little monk beating around the bush to say that he was uncultured? If they're uncultured, then so be it. Wasn't he still young? Taking advantage of his young age, he should go out and see more. That was the right thing to do. Big brother, big brother. Qiao Sen jumped onto Emolien. "Big brother, when I go to Shenzhou, you have to take me around." As if he had received a hot potato, Molien turned back to look at his wife and hurriedly said, "If you do your homework, I'll take you around. Otherwise, if your sister roars like a lioness from Hadong, I won't be able to help you." Qiao Sen couldn't help but look at Emolien with an expression as if he was looking at a henpecked husband. "Big brother, you can't do this." Chapter 3470. What? This imp actually said that he couldn't do it? Prince Mo resisted the urge to smack him on the head and glared at him while fuming. Our dear Qiao San clung to the crown prince and tried his best to slander him. As men, we must assert our masculinity in front of our wives in the future. Only then can we let them know that we men also have dignity. Everyone, just keep courting disaster. Jolin guffawed and reached out to pull her younger brother to the side, casually giving him a small knock on the head. "Shut up, don't think of dragging brother-in-law down with you. When brother-in-law angers sister, will you come out and block him?" Auber glanced at everyone in the hall, his gaze clearly softening. At this time, a servant came to report, "Eldest miss, your friends are here." It must be little Six Zheng and the others. Aber's eyes brightened, and he hastily said, "Quickly invite them in." "Forget it, I'll go welcome them myself." With that, he pulled Emolien and walked out the door. His friends from Huge Bear Squad came to greet them and surrounded them, laughing and chatting merrily. Aber invited everyone into the main hall. Qiao Zhongbang and company exchanged some pleasantries with Little Six Zhang and the others before inviting them to take a seat. At this time, the main hall had just been set up. Laughably, there was only a row of chairs, and even the tables hadn't been properly set up yet. Everyone was unconcerned, however, and they chatted in the hall. Thus, Emolien opened his mouth to publicize Sir Qiao Qiao's intentions. He asked, "Captain Gao, are you all willing to follow us to the Divine Province?" Captain Gao and the others were startled. Then, they exchanged glances before finally focusing their gazes on Little Six Zheng. Evidently, everyone basically regarded 6th young Master Zheng as their backbone now. Captain Gao especially relied heavily on Little Six Zheng and had to listen to his opinion on any decision. Little Six Zheng muttered to himself before looking at Aber and Emolien, saying softly, "I think. My personal opinion is that I want to pass through the upper 6 prefectures normally with my own strength before going to the Divine Land. Of course, this is just my personal opinion." Little Six Zheng looked at Captain Gao and the others. "Everyone can have their own." Captain Gao waved his hand. "We, the Giant Bear Squad, advance and retreat together. Since Little Six said so, you must have your reasons." Little Sixth Zheng nodded. Presently, Jojo has set up a large array in the Mo Kingdom capital, which is extremely beneficial to our cultivation. Our own realms are close to the spirit realm's critical point. If we can take the normal path to the 6 prefectures, our years of training and hard work will not be in vain. When Aber heard this, his eyes lit up, and he nodded in agreement. "I respect your opinions. If you want to go to the 6 prefectures and the upper 3 prefectures, I will definitely support you." After thinking about it, she took out a space ring from her inner world and handed it to Little Six Zheng. "However, don't reject the resources I'm giving you." Captain Gao and Hua Gu exchanged glances. The cheerful Hua Gu laughed heartily and patted Little Six Zheng's shoulder. "Since it's Jojo's kind intentions, we won't refuse. Besides, we just happen to need these resources. With these, we can better catch up to our companions, and we won't be left far behind by Jojo." Everyone guffawed and nodded repeatedly. Little Six Zheng also smiled when he heard this, and he silently accepted the space ring that Xiao Mu gave him, firmly engraving this favor in his heart. Chapter 3471. Captain Gao, we're on the same team. Since I've gone to Shenzhou before you, I'll naturally wait for you in Shenzhou with peace of mind. I believe that with your strength, you'll definitely be able to meet me in Shenzhou in the future. Even if it took 3 to 5 years, or even longer, as long as it was the Giant Bear Squad's choice, she would unconditionally support it. This was the trust and friendship between friends. Pure friendship was just that simple. Sister Gu was so moved that she jumped up and went forward to hug Aber. She choked with sobs and said, "Jojo, we'll miss you." Aber reached out and patted her back. Looking at the little girl with a slightly dark face, he nodded and said, "Let's meet again in Shenzhou." "Let's meet again in Shenzhou." "Let's meet again in Shenzhou." Several pairs of palms overlapped. In that instant, all the members of the Huge Bear Squad felt that their hearts were so close to each other, so close to each other. Wei Ziqin's eyes flashed with tears. She suddenly smiled and said, "Since we're so happy today, we must stay here and have a meal together. I'll go tell the kitchen." "Hey, what kitchen are you talking about? It's been destroyed long ago." Qiao Zhongbang shook his head, amused and annoyed. Qiao Zhongxing laughed heartily. "How about this? We're not particular people. Let's go to the back garden, which is still intact, and have a barbecue." "Second uncle, good idea." Qiao Sen was the first to raise his hands in agreement. Jolin's eyes suddenly lit up. She nodded and said, "I want to eat peaches." Wei Ziqin was amused by this pair of children. She poked her younger daughter's forehead with a finger. "You're still thinking about those peaches. When you were 3 years old, when our whole family was on the run, you hugged a peach for 2 days. Everyone couldn't help but laugh at this little foodie when they talked about it." Jolin wasn't embarrassed. She giggled and flashed to her sister's side. She hooked one of her arms and said, "Humph, I love peaches." Wei Ziqin and Xiao Zhongbang looked at each other and felt that time had passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, their children had grown up. Therefore, everyone set up a barbecue rack in the back garden. There was wine and meat, and they enjoyed a farewell banquet with laughter. The time spent together was short, and it was time to part. Little Sixth Zhang drained the wine cup in his hand in one gulp before turning to give Arbor a deep look. However, they believed that one day, they would be able to meet again in the Divine Prefecture. The next day, Qiao Mu entered the palace to see Her Majesty the Queen Dowager. She handed over the black-striped longevity pill that she had personally concocted, as well as a storage talisman that contained many pills and talismans. "Grandmother." The little fellow shook her hand and took out a medicine bottle from the storage talisman. "I've already pasted the name and dosage on this medicine bottle. You have to follow my doctor's instructions and take it every day." When she came back this time, she discovered that her grandmother was aging very quickly, and her vitality was severely depleted. Especially after this battle, her grandmother had consumed a large amount of vitality. Currently, there were many wrinkles on her face, and she appeared to have aged by no less than 10 years. She couldn't set her mind at ease, so she left behind prescriptions to nurse her grandmother back to health. However, time was limited, so she could only secretly instruct Feng Gu. It was naturally inconvenient for her to stay and nurse her grandmother back to health every day. "Good child. Grandmother is already so old. Time spares no one." Empress Dowager Meng smiled good-naturedly. Chapter 3472. Everyone will grow old. Grandmother's realm is stagnant, so naturally, her vitality will gradually decline with the passage of time. That won't happen. Arbor pulled her hand and shook it, saying softly, "Grandmother, as long as you listen to me and take your medicine on time, I guarantee that you'll be radiant after a month." Moreover, isn't it too early to say such discouraging words? You still have to see your great-grandson being born. Elderly Lady Qiao was startled, and then her eyes turned into crescents as she smiled. She patted Qiao Mu's small hand and nodded repeatedly in delight. "Good, good, good. My good grandchild, grandmother definitely won't let you down. Grandmother will definitely take good care of herself and watch as my precious great-grandchild is born." Feng Gu smiled and curtsied as she entered. "His Highness the Crown Prince is here." Grandmother nodded. When she saw Sun Ziyu's tall and straight figure enter, she kept looking at him with a strange gaze. Prince Mo was baffled. After exchanging some pleasantries with grandmother, he practically pulled his wife and fled. After leaving the bedchamber, Crown Prince pulled Sir Jojo into his arms. He narrowed his eyes and looked down at his wife. "Tell me honestly, what bad things did you say about me to grandmother just now?" Why did grandmother keep looking at him with such a strange gaze? It was as if she expected better from him. What did he do to make grandmother stare at him as if she was looking at an unfilial grandchild? It really made his hair stand on end. Arbor blinked, her gaze somewhat evasive. She muttered, "What could I have said? I didn't say anything." Prince Mo looked at the little fellow and saw that she seemed guilty. He immediately reached out and scratched her. "Tell me, what did you say?" Arbor's little face was wooden. After holding it in for a while, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. She twisted in his arms and said, "Nothing." He didn't say anything. "Ah, I still have to go to the outskirts to set up another array. We have to leave tomorrow. Time is tight, so don't fool around." Emolien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When did he fool around? This little fellow was used to bullying him. Just look at her. Whenever the topic was brought up that she didn't want to talk about, she would immediately twist it around forcefully. She didn't know what awkwardness was. Let's go, let's go. Miss Chow tugged at his sleeve and urged him twice before pulling him out of the palace. Over the past year, the number of zombies on Seekong Planet had clearly decreased by a lot. In addition, there was a continuous stream of cultivators who automatically organized and participated in the zombie clearing missions. Following the sharp decrease in the number of zombies, the lives of the people on Seekong Planet once again became peaceful, and their days gradually became better. The fortifications on Kwansekong Star were still being erected. In the next few years, there was probably no need to worry about the corpse puppets taking action again. The two of them left the city and headed for the suburbs. Aba said softly, "I think that Tianyun should have completely withdrawn from Seekong Planet." Emo Lien nodded. "Yeah, I think so too." As such, the number of corpse puppets would not increase because there was no Tianyun controlling them from behind the scenes. The days on Seekong Planet will also become better in the future, and Xiaoyu won't be under so much pressure in the future. Thinking of her increasingly mature and steady 12th brother, a trace of joy also appeared on Emo Lien's face. Yeah. As expected of the younger brother he valued. He was becoming more and more thorough in handling matters now. This time, he also displayed his strength and tenacity when fighting against the group of bandits from the Divine Continent. Chapter 3473. Although Emo Lien was quite satisfied with her younger brother, she still muttered, "We have to let him continue to gain experience." Hearing this, Aba nodded thoughtfully. "Xiao Yu is already so outstanding, but you're still not satisfied with him. It seems that I've been too lenient with Xiao Sen." Emo Lien, "Xiao Sen, I can't help you anymore." Emo Lien didn't expect that he would associate this with Xiao Sen, so he could only silently shed tears of sympathy for his younger brother. He casually said, "When we go to the Divine Province, Xiao Sen will have a chance to stay by our side. At that time, we can properly train him and grind down his temper." Aba felt that Emo Lien's words made a lot of sense, so he nodded and said, "Okay." Everything could wait until they returned to the Divine Land. The most important thing now was to fix all the nearby arrays. "I've left a few sets of protective array glyphs. When the time comes, I'll ask the Great King to send them to the Southern Shao Kingdom, Southern Bailey, and Northern Wei." Emo Lien naturally agreed with a smile. The special passageways were basically in the capitals of these big countries. As long as these places were protected, it would be even more difficult for people from the 3 states to come again. They had to guard against the wrath of the Heavenly Tao and break Jojo's attack and defense arrays. After suffering a few setbacks, they probably would not dare to cause trouble again. Moreover, when they returned, this matter would not be settled peacefully. They had to continue to punish some people as a warning to others. They had to let them act out and make them scared. Only then would they know how precious life was and that they should cherish the good times. "Have the jade stones found in the Pangu clan started to be polished into jade pieces?" Aba asked curiously. At this moment, she had used dozens of jade array glyphs, so the blank jade pieces in her hands were basically empty. She switched to using ebony pieces. "It's already started. When we return to Dragon Flame City, those jade pieces will probably be handed over to you. We can probably hand over 100,000 pieces first. This should be enough for a while. Those jade stones can continue to be produced and polished. It's not far from 1,000,000 jade pieces." "Okay." Xiao Mu happily nodded her small head upon hearing this. Without these blank jade slips, she couldn't draw talismans any time and anywhere. She was really not used to it. Li Yao did not expect that the jade of the Pangu clan could be polished into 1,000,000 blank jade pieces. That was not bad at all. Leaving aside the soul-gathering bell and the wealth that Jing Ting had left behind, the jade alone was enough to make the battle against the Pangu clan worthwhile. After the two of them finished setting up the array formation in the outskirts, they strolled around the vicinity. After making sure that there was nothing out of the ordinary in the surroundings, they returned to the city. Aba returned to the Chow family, intending to bring his family to the palace for a gathering. The Empress Dowager's body was getting better, and the crisis was gone. The great king was overjoyed and decided to hold a banquet that night. He invited all the officials of the third rank and above to the palace to celebrate. Therefore, after Auber and the crown prince finished setting up the talisman array outside the city, they went back to the city to pick up the Chow family. Unexpectedly, when they arrived at the Chow family, they saw a group of servants in gray servant uniforms fighting with several servants of the Chow family outside the door. His father, Chow Zhongbong, and his mother, Wei Ziqin, were standing in front of the door with ugly expressions. A few familiar-looking men and women were standing in front of them, and they were arguing with them. Auber immediately frowned and scolded with a displeased expression. He walked out of the carriage step by step. Emolienne narrowed her eyes and coldly stared at the group of people who were making trouble in front of the Chow family's door. Chapter 3474. Eldest Miss, Eldest Miss. When the Chow family servants saw that their powerful eldest miss had returned, they all seemed to have been injected with chicken blood, their spirits roused. Auber carefully looked at the people who were quarreling with his parents. He felt that their faces were somewhat familiar, but for a moment, he could not remember who they were. At this moment, Cousin Pu Rulin quickly walked out and gracefully bowed. "Greetings to your Highness the Crown Prince, Crown Princess." Auber hurriedly helped her up. "Cousin need not be so courteous." He then turned to look at the quarreling people and suddenly had a flash of inspiration. That Zhou Yuan from the Zhou family? Wasn't this Cousin Pu Rulin's ex-husband, that Zhou Yuan who had kicked up a fuss about demoting his wife to a concubine for the sake of riches and honor? Cousin had already divorced this person, so why was he here to kick up a fuss? Pu Rulin nodded and coldly glanced at Zhou Yuan and his people who were kicking up a fuss in front of the Chow family's entrance. Zhou Yuan's mother, that woman with a head full of pearls and jade and as fat as a pig, was shouting at the top of her lungs. "If not for the disaster your Chow family caused, how could our family be implicated? Right now, our family's old master has been beaten to death and our family's wealth has been completely stolen. I don't care, you should compensate our Zhou family, you must compensate. Didn't you hook up with the richest family, the Gao family? Do you even care about a trifling sum of money?" Eldest Aunt Xiao Wanxiu angrily glared at Zhou Yuan's mother and sternly shouted, "I advise you not to cause trouble here, or else you won't be able to clean up the mess." "All right. You want to use the crown princess to pressure people again." Zhou Yuan's mother was so anxious that her eyes turned red. Just as she was about to pounce, a black shadow flashed forward and grabbed the back of her neck by the clothes. The moment the purple forest guards acted, they immediately tidied up the quarreling people in front of the entrance and forced them to lie down. Zhou Yuan jumped in fright. When he turned around and saw the unhappy crown prince, he rolled his eyes and hurriedly said, "Your Highness Crown Prince, Crown Princess, it's not that we've come to disturb you on purpose. It's just that our family has been turned into a mess by those experts from the Divine Prefecture. Our days are really difficult to live on." Auber coldly glanced at them, then his gaze fell on Zhou Yuan's mother. At this moment, the old woman was still cursing incoherently, incessantly seeking death. Auber lightly raised his hand. Immediately, 2 violet forest guards stepped forward and dragged Zhou Yuan's mother away. Zhou Yuan's eyes immediately filled with terror. He looked towards the cold-faced little crown princess and cried out in alarm, "Crown Princess, what are you doing?" "My mother didn't commit any major crimes. What are you doing? You can't use your noble statuses to be so overbearing and not give people a way out." Auber icily glanced at him, then shifted his gaze and saw Huifeng walking over while carrying a struggling woman. Huifeng immediately tossed the woman in front of Auber and cupped his fists. "Crown Princess, this woman is sneaking around the back door." Auber glanced at the woman, but he couldn't recall who she was. However, Pu Rulin raised her voice and angrily shouted, "Gao Chi-Chi, you're also here to make a fuss? Your Gao family was implicated by the Chow family and your father died, and all of your family's wealth was taken away by experts?" When Gao Chi-Chi heard this, her gaze instantly sharpened. She jumped up from the ground and struggled to pounce at Pu Rulin. "You be *tch, Whose father are you cursing to die? Before her claws could reach Pu Rulan's face, Huifeng suddenly grabbed her wrist. With a crack, Gao Qiqi immediately squealed like a pig being slaughtered. Chapter 3475. Qiqi. Zhou Yuan instantly became even more flustered. He hastily stepped forward and hugged Gao Qiqi's shoulders, shouting at Arbor and the others, "You, how can you be so unreasonable?" Gao Qiqi clutched a broken arm, her eyes overflowing with tears as she unwillingly glared at Pu Rulan. Originally, this woman wasn't even worth half a spirit coin in front of her, but now, because she had latched onto the Chao family, latched onto the Crown Princess and His Highness the Crown Prince, she actually dared to be so impudent in front of her. Pu Rulan was too lazy to speak with her. She only glanced at her mockingly before walking to her mother, Chao Wenxiu's side. Zhou Yuan looked at his ex-wife, unable to vent his anger. Ever since they divorced, this ex-wife had become more and more outrageous. Now, she actually dared to treat her mother-in-law and husband with cold eyes. She simply didn't know what she was talking about. Arbor coldly swept a glance over them. "Do you want to confess yourself, or does this crown princess use special methods to make you confess?" Zhou Yuan's eyes darted around, then he wailed, "Crown princess, this lowly one has been wrongly accused. This lowly one really can't continue living at home, so this lowly one thought of borrowing some spirit coins from Rulan to get by." Pu Rulan coldly interrupted him. "Do you think everyone is a fool? Didn't you all gather at the front door to make a fuss with uncle and aunt so that slut Gao Qiqi could sneak into the Chao family from the back door? Little bastard, hurry up and tell us what you came here for." Chao Wenxiu was so angry that her face was ashen. Today, mother and daughter were brought here by the Chao family to discuss matters. Her older brother, Chao Zhongbang, mentioned that after they moved out of Sikong Planet, they would be allowed to live in the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate. He said that he had already left enough money for them. In addition to the monthly salary that the imperial court would still give them, this amount of spirit coins was enough for them to live on. They didn't even need to dismiss the servants at home, so they just needed to live a good life. Chao Wenxiu and Pu Rulan were currently greeting Chao Zhongbang and his family with faces full of gratitude. Unexpectedly, that little bastard from the Garden of Zhou had brought his mother and company over to cause a ruckus. He even insisted that it was the Chao family's fault for harming his father's life. What a joke. When the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture attacked, you didn't hide at home. You were caught and lost your life. How is it the Chao family's fault? The Chao family is also a victim, okay? Their house hadn't been fully repaired yet. The Gao family is a rich and powerful family, and there are times when you don't have any spirit coins to spend. Then, she turned to look at Gao Qiqi and said with a cold smile, "Could it be that the family has really declined because of the death of their father?" "Bah, you bitch. What nonsense are you talking about?" Gao Qiqi screamed harshly like an evil spirit. She rushed over and wanted to hit Pu Rulan's face. However, as soon as she lifted her arm, it drooped down as if it was crippled. It was sore, painful, and uncomfortable. She couldn't help but cry. "Yuan Lang, you have to uphold justice for me. This shrew, she's really hateful." Just as Zhou Yuan was about to explode, he saw Arbor raise his eyes slightly. Without another word, a purple forest guard beside him slapped him across the face. With this slap, Zhou Yuan lost 2 of his teeth. His face instantly burned with pain, and he felt like his tongue was about to be tied up when he spoke. Arbor looked at them with an icy gaze. Dictum talisman. To deal with this kind of petty person who couldn't even reach the profound realm, there was no need for a dictum talisman made from jade talismans. Chapter 3476. It was the lowest grade paper talisman. A blue talisman was enough to make them confess honestly. "Speak clearly," Arbor said coldly. "Who ordered you to come here and cause trouble?" "That lord said that the Chao clan has a token to leave the city. He wanted us to steal it and give it to him." Arbor's eyes narrowed dangerously. To the side, Emolienne coldly looked at the man kneeling on the ground, his mouth opening and closing as he spat out the truth. Her lips curved into an indifferent sneer. So, there were still fish that slipped through the net. The young couple looked at each other and saw a hint of coldness in each other's eyes. At this moment, Zhou Yuan also said, "That lord killed my father with a single palm strike. We were forced to come to the Qiao clan and help him steal the token." At this moment, Gao Qiqi's face was already ashen. Her eyes were filled with resentment as she glared at Zhou Yuan. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have made a fuss about marrying this pretty boy. When it came down to it, he didn't have the slightest ability to take responsibility. No matter what others asked, he would confess. If he had randomly made up a reason, perhaps they could still have escaped today. But now, the crime of colluding with the enemy and betraying the country was bound to fall on their shoulders. Gao Qiqi hurriedly walked forward on her knees and cried out, "No, it's not like that. Listen to me." Arba swept his sleeve and heavily slapped Gao Qiqi's face. "I didn't ask you to speak." The young crown princess looked at her coldly. She turned her head and continued to ask Zhou Yuan, "Where is that person right now?" "That lord is in our Zhou clan. He was injured 2 days ago. Right now, the entire city is sealed off. There's also a very powerful talisman seal in the sky. He can't get out." Arba's lips curled. He stepped forward and heavily kicked Zhou Yuan's leg. With a crisp crack, Zhou Yuan woke up from the pain. He hugged his leg and rolled around on the ground. His face was pale from fright. "My son!" Zhou Yuan cried out like a mother in mourning. "Take us to the Zhou clan." Arba looked at the pretty boy in front of him indifferently and said coldly, "Don't try anything funny, or I'll turn your whole family into ashes." Zhou Yuan's body trembled. At this moment, fear had already seized his mind. He didn't expect that he would be caught red-handed just because he thought of a way to steal a pass token. He even confessed everything in a daze. Now that she thought about it, it was as though she was in a dream just now. Her mind was very clear. Although she was anxious and knew that she shouldn't reveal everything, for some reason, she obediently answered all of the Crown Prince Consort's questions word by word. It was as if his mind had been controlled by something strange at that time, forcing him to reveal everything he knew. Zhou Yuan's mother saw that the situation was not looking good. With a "I-O," she rolled her chubby body forward and reached out to hug the Crown Princess's leg, but she was kicked away. "Aya!" Zhou Yuan's mother fell to the ground, slapping her thighs as she wailed, "We had no other choice. Our whole family's lives were in that lord's hands at that time. If we didn't agree to help him, he would have dealt with our whole family like how he dealt with my husband." Arba heard this and couldn't help but sneer. Heh. They sounded really pitiful, but just now, their faces were really ugly to the extreme. Chapter 3477. When he thought of how Zhou Yuan's family actually harbored such vile intentions, an indescribable anger arose in Arba's heart. "Take them away." Emolienne couldn't be bothered to waste words with them. She directly waved her hand and had the Purple Forest Guards lift this group of people up. Huifeng chuckled as he lifted Zhou Yuan and swayed his body. He then reached out to caress Zhou Yuan's dog head. "Young Master Zhou, I advise you to obediently lead the way and not play any tricks. Be careful of your dog life." Zhou Yuan couldn't help but shudder in fright, and he hastily said, I won't play any tricks, Wyas." He was nearly scared out of his wits, so how could he dare to play any tricks now? Moreover, the purpose of his family's visit had already been completely exposed. Even if he stiffened his neck and refused to admit it, it would be of no avail. Others had already seen through them long ago. The group majestically arrived at the entrance of the Zhou residence, naturally attracting the attention of many people along the way. Those who were curious followed along, causing the group to grow larger and larger. Emolienne and the others had just arrived at the entrance of the Zhou residence when they heard a loud noise coming from inside. The 2 vermilion doors suddenly fell down. Everyone focused their eyes and immediately saw a man with round, tiger-like eyes quickly walking out with a woman by the neck. His fierce-looking face was filled with malevolence. "Don't come over," the man sternly said. He tightened his grip around the delicate woman's neck. "If you come over, I'll kill her." "Sister!" Zhou Yuan cried out in alarm. Zhou Yuan's mother's eyes were also about to pop out as she repeatedly yelled, "Damned bastard, hurry and save my daughter." "Daughter! Daughter, don't be afraid, mother is coming." "Ah! Sir, let go of my daughter, let go of her." She was about to pounce forward as she spoke, but the man tightened his grip around the woman's neck. "If you come any closer, I'll strangle her to death." When Zhou Yuan's mother saw that the whites of her daughter's eyes were about to pop out, she didn't dare to go forward and repeatedly waved her hands to beg for mercy. "Sir, please spare my daughter. Sir, I won't come over. Please have mercy on me. Please have mercy on me." Pu Rulan could not help but frown when she saw this. His sister-in-law had actually fallen into the hands of that thief. Her sister-in-law usually had a gentle personality and did everything in a gentle and weak manner. Although she did not have much of an opinion of her own, she had always been led by the nose by Zhou Yuan's mother. However, she was very kind-hearted. It was rare that she was the only good bamboo shoot in the Zhou family's nest of bad bamboo shoots. Previously, when she and her mother, Qiao Wanxiu, were imprisoned in the woodshed in the garden of Zhou, it was also thanks to this sister-in-law that they did not starve to death. Now that she saw her sister-in-law fall into the enemy's hands, her heart couldn't help but pound, and she hurriedly turned to look at her stoic-faced younger cousin. Abba frowned and said coldly, "You can't run away. Let go of your hostage and kneel down." At this moment, the people walking up and down the street had also noticed the black-clothed man holding the weak woman by the neck at the gate of the garden of Zhou. Looking at his attire, everyone couldn't help but jump in fright. Although they were somewhat afraid, as they fled far away, they could not help but secretly hide in a corner and size up the black-clothed man. In any case, with His Highness the Crown Prince here, nothing major would happen. They could just hide far away and watch. This was what the Crown Prince's die-hard fans thought in their hearts. Chapter 3478. Abba coldly gazed at that black-clothed man, his voice icy as he said, "Still not surrendering?" That man instantly became anxious and hastily clutched the woman's throat, shouting harshly, "I want you to immediately let me out of the city, let me out of the city." What kind of joke was this? He barely managed to keep his life, so of course he had to return alive. He didn't believe that His Highness the Crown Prince, the Crown Princess, would disregard the lives of her subjects and disregard the lives of others. As long as he gambled correctly, he could survive this time. The black-clothed man hastily said and clutched that delicate woman's neck, retreating several steps. "You won't let me go? Then I'll kill her immediately." "Go ahead and kill her." Abba sneered, his eyes as chilling as ice pearls, causing people to involuntarily be alarmed. "It's her honor to be able to sacrifice herself for our Mo kingdom. The royal family of the Mo kingdom will erect a monument for her and inscribe inscriptions to extol her noble character." Everyone, why was the little crown princess's expression so frosty and terrifying when she said these words? She spoke as if it was true. Everyone's hearts couldn't help but tighten, and they sneaked several glances at the crown princess. However, they couldn't discern any abnormality from the crown princess's face. "You!" The black-clothed man's face flushed red, and he couldn't resist shouting furiously. He repeatedly threatened, "Hurry and let me go. I'm not joking with you. I can promise you that as long as you let me go, I definitely won't harm this woman in the slightest." Abba coldly stared at the man in front of him, watching as his mouth opened and closed non-stop. "As long as you're willing to let me go, I can guarantee that I won't set foot on Seekong Planet for the rest of my life." "I said you can't run." Before the man could finish swearing, Abba's aloof voice interrupted him. The little stoic coldly gazed at the man in front of her. "Do you not understand human speech? Or are you saying you want to die in a different way?" If you let her go now, I can still let you die peacefully and smoothly. Otherwise, you won't even have the chance to die. At that time, you might beg me, and you won't be able to die even if you want to." Arba's cold gaze fell on the man. His voice was calm and indifferent as usual. "Don't blame me for not warning you beforehand." The black-clothed man's eyes shrank in horror as he hurriedly defended himself. "No, I don't want to die, Crown Princess. I didn't come to Seekong Planet to cause trouble on purpose. I was also instructed by someone." The black-robed man stuttered as he tried to explain, but he didn't know what he was talking about. The words that came out of his mouth were so pale and powerless. Even his explanation seemed to be completely to shift the blame. There was no substantial persuasiveness at all. "The Crown Princess said you can't leave today, so you can't leave." Arba interrupted him coldly and frowned impatiently. "If you still persist in going about things the wrong way, then don't blame me, the Crown Princess, for being merciless." The black-clothed man's eyes instantly widened as he looked at her in horror. "No, why you're lying to me." Suddenly, a white figure swiftly scuttled over and bit the webbing between his thumb and index finger at lightning speed. He instantly felt his hand go numb, and his entire arm drooped down. The long sword fell to the ground with a clang. His eyes were filled with terror. Chapter 3479. Huifeng swiftly pulled the delicate woman from the burly man's side and directly pushed her back. The woman also seemed to have been scared silly and fell on her but, unable to utter a single word for a long time. Seeing this, Pu Ruolin felt that her sister-in-law was very pitiful and quickly went up to support her arm. She repeatedly called out, "Sister-in-law, are you all right?" "Eldest sister-in-law." The delicate woman finally regained her wits. When she thought of the danger just now, tears instantly welled up in her eyes. "Don't touch her." Zhou Yuan's mother rushed over and swatted Pu Ruolin's arm away, glaring hatefully at her. "I don't need your fake kindness. If it weren't for a woman like you being so vicious, how could my daughter have experienced such a dangerous situation just now? You're the one who should be captured." Zhou Yuan's mother indignantly scolded, "You're also the one who should die." Qiao Wenxiu had always been a timid person, but at this time, she couldn't help but be angered by Zhou Yuan's mother until her blood boiled. Seeing the old woman humiliating her daughter like this, Qiao Wenxiu rushed up. She didn't know where the strength came from, but she slapped the old woman's face. "Ah!" Zhou Yuan's mother angrily widened her eyes, as if she wanted to eat someone. Before she could make a fuss, she was kicked flat on her face by a purple forest guard and dragged to the side. "Haven't you shouted enough?" The purple forest guard impatiently scolded. "Behave yourself. The Crown Princess hasn't said how she's going to deal with you. Just wait." Zhou Yuan's mother instantly wilted like a frosted eggplant. When she recalled the scene of her family making a fuss in front of the Qiao clan, she couldn't help but secretly regret it. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have made a fuss. Great, now she had angered the Crown Princess and gotten herself into trouble for no reason. The black-clothed man's face was ashen, and he repeatedly retreated a few steps with an ashen expression. He anxiously said, "Crown Princess, you can't kill me. I'm from the Shi clan, the Shi clan of the 6 great patrician families. Our Shi clan's smelting skills are unparalleled in the world. It's. The man took a step back, and his gaze followed the sword pointed at his throat. He only saw the little girl's pair of cold and lonely eyes looking at him emotionlessly. "The Shi family," she said coldly. "When I return to the Divine Prefecture, the Shi family will have to pay the price." "What 6 great aristocratic families or 8 great aristocratic families? Do you think you can get away unscathed after touching my family? What a joke." The man panicked and waved his hands as he shouted, "You can't kill me! You can't kill me!" Arba smirked and sneered, "I know you want to die in a different way." "Chirp, chirp!" The little girl calmly called out. "Chirp!" The little white squirrel excitedly grew in size with a bang. Like a small mountain, it suddenly pressed down on the man's body. Ah! Caught off guard, the brawny man was scared out of his wits before he died. How could he have expected that the cute little white squirrel hanging in front of him would actually... Then, he sat down on her body. Just like that, it completely pressed him down. He was a dignified 10th level spiritual master, but under the little white squirrel's thick but... He only had half an arm exposed to struggle for a bit before he completely died. F***ck, this really was an undignified way to die. Everyone couldn't help but secretly curse in their hearts. They carefully stole glances at the expressionless little crown princess. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.